The Water Advisory Committee meeting for January 23rd to order. So record us. All right, and I did promise, I out of admiration for Greg's work on Thursday, I did promise to try to keep us really to the clock here. So we have the minutes that we have to review. This would be our first order of business. Has everybody had a chance to look at them? You want just a few seconds on the minutes draft? Anybody has any comments, concerns, motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, are approved. Okay, and that takes us to our first traditional agenda item, which is the water level report. So Greg and
all right, I think everybody has been probably received this. It is January 18th it's dated. That was the date that they did the study. It was before some rain that followed shortly afterwards. And the conclusion that I have is that the current Big Four values, we only have 3 of them, but that's another story, are below the median values, but they're moving upward. They're in the 40 percentile range, and all the other wells are actually above the median. And the change that we had, Ken's numbers here on the front page show the rainfall status. It's 3.27 as of 20th. Which it's not a bad number. The dry years that we had there in 2020 were that was 2.12. So with what happened the previous month or two, there seems to be.
Well, we ran
like the waves are coming. The rain, the atmospheric river has moved our way a little. So. Not that it's an aquifer. We are, oddly enough, still in a abnormally dry status, except for the southern half of Shelter Island, which is in a moderate drought status. It's kind of strange. You can just see Mishamek kind of floating, like the line runs across. You can see Mishamek associated with the south. And they've been promising for a couple of months here now, at least, that they're going to expect a removal of drought status, but it has not happened. Again, then we have the ranking chart, which shows we are moving in the right direction, and we have enough days like this. We'll be moving more, presumably.
Greg, I just had one question.
Sure.
Look on that page. How does the January reading compare to the January reading in other years? I mean, just my perception in just looking at the picture, the lines, is that we are lower the January period.
And I actually think the graph is actually telling us that we're below the January average. That's not interpreting.
If you just take the line up from January, that reading, and then compare it to
all of the Januaries, right?
Just the Januaries. It just looks like we're lower than we have been in other Januaries.
This actually shows what happened in January, and that's not a chart, but it's a table. It's not a chart, and it gives you, for example, the median well history. It's for the we'll go to the Goat Hill well. The Goat Hill well is just below the median at this point in January. The last third or fourth week of January, what we typically would have expected from the history that we have of that well, it's 5.67 is the median value, and we're at 5.65 right now. So that's why you say we're pretty much hitting them. We're below the median, but not by much. And then of course, Manwaring and Congdon, we have readings for both of them, slightly below the median, but not terrific. And we don't have a value right now in Manhasset. That automated well is still not functioning particularly well.
And I think that's the topic I would like to move to, but before we do, Ken, did you want to comment at all about
the only comment
rainfall?
I have is the under my numbers under year to date, It shouldn't be not year-to-date, it should be January 20 numbers that we have in there for,
So
in
that's,
other words, it's not to the 20th of the month, it's to all of January when we're talking about year-to-date precipitation to date, because I did not truncate it.
Okay, so,
So it's all of January numbers we're looking at there on the second column of data under precipitation.
I mean, the thing that feels nice is that we're kind of getting it slow and steady
yeah,
for a period of
That's
time.
a perfect range.
Right, so it's the kind of rain that doesn't cause erosion, the kind of rain that we would prefer to see as opposed to drought and
Yeah.
torrential. And
right. And to illustrate, the change table says, how is the change from December to January? Did it go up, down, even? And you can see that most of the wells are slightly above what their median value was.
oh, I see. That's that pink bar
That's just
across the.
Yeah, the pink line is the median there. And
Changes.
as you go through the year, the median value of change, you look at July's median change, on all of the values are lower. They're almost always lower than the median because we're drawing out. So I don't think I put the count in. 11 of 12 wells increased. That's January. That's a kind of a normal, right? Normally there's 2 wells. It looks like 3 wells might have lost.
so again, keep us on the clock, right?
Yeah.
It looks like we have a pretty good handle on the long-term picture, and that our long-term picture is not substantially different than, expected values. It was a little under, we're coming right back, we're swinging back to the median.
I have an interesting comment though on rainfall. John Holman and I are still basically, we compare numbers. In January, he sent me his data sheet, which is basically a handwritten document, basically. So he records rainfall, mine's a spreadsheet. About 3 more inches in the center. Interestingly enough, he
Versus-
records Silver Beach.
Right.
Yeah, just a little interesting. Yeah, the location. We go around location.
Doesn't matter.
So it's, something to think about.
Okay, so, and again, focusing more on detail, so we're kind of still waiting more of the online data, the real-time data to come online for us, Greg? Do we have any more information about, wells?
Well, the wells right now, there's, I think they're still having trouble there, and I have not checked into
Some
them.
follow through that we might want to do with USGS.
To the dashboard, and hopefully,
See how many are working.
I know Peter sent out how to get to it, I think. If you go there, you'll see a nice white triangle, which is Hay Beach, Goat Hill, and 2 of the Silver Beach wells. They're nice white triangles, and then there's 4 dark triangles, or three dark triangles, where the wells aren't working, and the equipment is not sending anything out.
Right. So we kind of want to get that, again, we're moving toward a much more data focused, us being more data focused. So it feels like a minimum thing for us to just see where USGS is at, let them know, yeah, as soon as you have it, we're going to use it. So, right. Okay. So if everybody's good with the water levels? Okay. So Fresh Pond WQI report back. So on Thursday, did you have something else you
It
want?
was Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, on Thursday, the WQI, I have to, in general, recuse myself around any discussions about Fresh Pond because I'm the co-president of the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association and live on Fresh Pond. But this is just a report back about something that has already happened, and others can comment on it as well. But on Thursday, the WQI unanimously approved passing to the board funding for the limnetic withdrawal project specifically for Fresh Pond. So we're now looking forward to having a public hearing with the board and moving that program forward. From my point of view, I just want to say thanks to Greg, because again, he got that done, and he got that done on a lot of levels. And one is by watching the clock strictly, and the other
A definition of what's the scientific basis. So he said, come back and provide, develop that, put it together, assemble it. I'm sure Pito's got his three academics that are on his team. They probably know 12 of them. But then we'd be asked, I think, I would ask for, if you can find three that are closest to what, Fresh Pond looks like, I'd be very happy.
Yeah, and we're kind of, 99% of what needed to happen happened. The rest will happen no matter what, however we work that out. The Fresh Pond neighbors are eager to be standing up and financing. We understand that a lot of this is really good for us as well as the community as a whole. So the portion of the proposal that involved cleaning up in front of, the public access area and individual homes, the Fresh Pond Neighbors Association has said from the very beginning, we will finance that. And so we're not actually asking for, but there is an element where things have to be also permitted, and that relates to permitting for the cleanup to protect people in a short-term basis while the long-term project goes forward. So anyway, clearly all of this is in the service of aquatic habitat restoration. We'll go ahead and provide it.
Just to back up to where I think I stopped, as I say, we are establishing how we're going to do that sort of thing, and we'll set precedents. That there'll be a precedent saying, okay, it's only $6,900, and somebody else is going to pay for all the function, and we really don't have a scientific benefit that has been presented to us.
We should do letter of law and present the scientific benefit. So that's where you don't have any objection.
Yeah, good.
Absolutely not. And however, basically, we're going forward win-win-win. It should be beneficial to the community and to the town as a whole. So,
our baseline is going to be created on Menantic Creek nitrogen content.
I would love baseline work to be done on Menantic Creek nitrogen content. This is not part of this proposal, but
no, I know, but this is just in general what advisory kind of things like we like to do.
Yeah.
To over time be able to understand if things are working or if we're making any progress.
So to add Menantic and Dickerson as well, I would.
Yeah, right. Well, the whole Menantic Creek.
Because they're in the area of influence.
So one of the reasons why this proposal, I think, was well received is that in addition to its primary function, which is to stop harmful algal blooms in the pond, as a side effect, we have the amount of nitrogen reduction sort of automatically happening because you're pulling up the bottom waters and they're being exposed to the air and there's evaporation going on. The equivalent of putting every single home on Fresh Pond onto an IAA nitrogen reducing system. Mm-hmm. And actually beyond that, about PO's numbers show about 7 homes beyond that, about 22 homes. We're only like 15. So that was just sort of an auxiliary benefit so the cost benefit analysis was kind of easy to do.
Bigger denominator.
Yeah, you're distributing over more benefit. So, but at the same time, Ken is absolutely right. You want to prove that actually happened. There's about 1.25 years time for all the water in Fresh Pond to flow under the ground to Menantic, about 75%, and Dickerson, about 25%. Mm-hmm. So you would expect we'd see nitrogen reduction in the creeks, again, of the amount that we're essentially seeing that we're evaporating.
Because it benefits Westpac. I mean, basically, these are big benefits.
So what's the cost of a monitoring well at either location?
Wouldn't be,
Does it make sense to just put this on the project?
Well,
Testing.
Well, okay, so just keep in mind, South Ferry Hills now has real-time monitoring, which we intend to discuss later in today's discussion. And we also have a community group at Menantic that wants to do citizen science on Menantic Creek. So there may be, dovetailing opportunities here, whether or not it's all done within the Fresh Pond project or not, so. So, anyway.
one last point is that how is the advanced system installations going around the Fresh Pond with
So one homeowner has installed already. Other homeowner is permitted for it, but we're on hold because we need to. There's the possibility that nitrogen-reducing systems will cause a failure to uptake phosphorus. And phosphorus is the problem that we experience in Fresh Pond. So we need the advanced septic systems. We have a citizen of honor. We need to have the phosphorus reducing systems come online as well. So there's a little bit of a hold because people in Fresh Pond need a little bit more expensive IA system and one that's right. Because we're right on the pond, and so the impact, we have to think about the phosphorus impact as well as the nitrogen impact. So that's our basic hold on that.
It would actually be recommended that we don't proceed at this time with any IA installations
until
we can conclude that issue.
Okay, that's good.
It may actually cause a negative impact rather than a positive one.
Good point.
When reflecting on
On the project itself.
just on the pond.
You could have more harmful algal blooms if you reduce the nitrogen in relation to phosphorus.
Exactly, yeah. The ratio nitrogen to phosphorus is very important in terms of the remediation project, or just in general to the pond health. And if you reduce the nitrogen and the phosphorus stays the same, it can exacerbate the problems that you have.
So we kind of have to, we're going to be there, but we're on, everybody on the pond is asking, when should I go forward to do this?
And that may be, at this time, the most undervalued outcome of the engineering study that we had done to understand what are the issues with the pond. One good thing about Shelter Islanders now is everybody seems to understand IA systems are a good thing. When we dig into that a little more, it's important to know that there are certain circumstances where that's not the case. IA systems, are great, but there are cases where they're not ideal. And this is exactly one of those. Fresh Pond has always been a little unique because it's a freshwater wetland, and we don't have a lot of exposure to that. Even our regulators, talking to people at the DEC in our region, don't have a lot of exposure to freshwater remediation projects. So this was something that came out of the study, the engineering study, and I think that right now has not been discussed much, but in my mind, that's a huge outcome for us as a township to understand how to address policy towards the Fresh Pond community and how that would influence WQI approvals for the installations. And that's certainly not the kind of thing that would get picked up at the county funding level if you were to apply for an IA system.
And this is non-oxygen injection.
Yeah, we're not doing oxygenation because we felt that would be a Band-Aid approach.
More a proven methodology.
Right. And also, it's not just that it's proven. I think one of the things that Greg was at pains to bring out was that there are risks associated with, it not only is it one size fits all with IA systems, or it's not one size fits all with IA systems. With any system, you're dealing with the very, very specific situation. Fresh Pond is an unusual, interesting geological formation. 50-foot deep kettle pond filling with our fresh groundwater, showing us our groundwater, then flowing onward into the bays and into the estuaries. That's a very unique situation. You really have to look at it specifically, and the design of the system had to be specific to that. And one of the reasons why there is cost associated is because PO quite rightly has built in this prototyping and continued testing and continued fine tuning of the parameters so that we can get it right. And I think that is just, I think it's the point that Joe is also making, is that in each specific situation, it's important to do the work and get it right. So. All right. So are there comments or thoughts about Fresh Pond? Do we want to, is there more that we take on there? I'm sorry? Is there anything more that we need to discuss before we move? I'm trying to keep with the clock.
No, I don't think.
Fresh Pond is.
You know, we talked about the wheres and the whys of the WQI process, and so go on.
Right. Okay, so then I'm moving on. I think we can't avoid talking about the center system. It's true that we also have to talk about the center system in a cautious way because we're going through steps, and so the secret review has not been completed. And I think I should turn it over to Joe in terms of like, where are we in the overall process? What can we like know and discuss about the center?
It's not so much where are we, it's more where the heck are we?
Where the heck are we? Yeah, that's true.
And that's the cleanup.
So we are trying to wrap up what's called the coordinated review process. So the secret consultant engages the various stakeholders, regulators, that would contribute to permitting and approving this type of project. They are asked for comments and feedback so that it can all be managed at the same time and incorporated into their ultimate environmental assessment and review. We've received feedback from a couple of regulatory agencies, the Department of Transportation, Department of Health Services, a couple of private entities. And so all of that is being packaged up, and the consultant, PW Grosser, will be addressing each of those items as part of their report and conclusion to the town. So that's their task, to receive these comments and to coordinate with the design engineer or myself as needed to answer those questions, and then it all gets presented in one report. So there are timelines associated with that. They're legally set. That's not I don't know the exact numbers. We are approaching the end of that. And so PW Grosser is preparing or beginning the preparation of that final report. And that will be the document that then gets, publicly discussed and examined. And so anyone who wanted the opportunity to contribute their concerns, be it Sylvester Manor, neighbors, DC, et cetera, that's their opportunity to present something to the record to be evaluated as part of the environmental assessment.
So that's stakeholder comment, what you're just describing.
Yeah, it's one layer of what, is ultimately many layers of stakeholder comment, but that's the opportunity for stakeholders in this stage of the environmental review in preparing the environmental assessment that will go forth for permit.
Is that what comes out of this report will be an environmental assessment?
Yeah, exactly.
So to be clear, roadmap-wise, we're discussing the SEQURA, secret review, which is the environmental quality, right, the environmental impact statement. And we are anticipating, I gather, we're wrapping up, or Joe was not absolutely certain of when.
There are some dates that certain entities are required to be notified. They have X amount of time to reply. If they don't, these are like state established laws. And so once that time expires, then the consultant moves forward and says, we didn't hear anything from so-and-so. But there are also many people or entities that voluntarily can contribute, and the consultant's role is to take those documents and include those as well, assess any concerns or questions that came from those stakeholders.
So sometime in the near future, I'm assuming that we're talking weeks, not months.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so sometime in the near future, not months, but weeks from now, the environmental review will be completed. At that point, roadmap-wise, the next step will be then everybody has a chance to comment. Public comment about
on the environmental
impact assessment, what it says, what the implications of what it says are,
right,
for the overall decision-making process.
So there's been some public requests for responding to the letter from Suffolk County or responding to the request from Sylvester Manor. That those letters and those questions posed by those entities are included, and that's the purpose of this whole review process. So all of those answers are being gathered, consolidated to one final report. So it's not that they're being ignored, it's just that those letters perhaps prematurely entered the public domain because they lack the context of the full environmental assessment.
Probably would be a good thing to, even if it's an email saying, we received your letter and we are processing it, and we expect around in middle of February, we'll be able to sit down and talk to you about it. That would be an option, right?
The letter from the stakeholders?
Well, yeah, if somebody sent you something.
Yeah.
And let's say in November, and they haven't heard, now they're wondering, did my letter get lost? Did they just all give it crap?
No, any entity that submitted a request or concerns have been notified of
They
exactly
have been
that.
notified, okay.
Yeah,
So
that's
great,
why.
that's just as what I was saying.
Well, that's what I meant about process, yeah. So for instance, Suffolk County Health Department sent us comments, feedback on their review. That letter, has been in the public domain now, but it's sort of lacking any context. That was a response to information we sent them, and they understand that they submitted that letter to be part of our formal report, which we are providing answers to. So it's sort of unfair to just piecemeal it now. The comprehensive report
Makes sense.
I was surprised to hear about another public water system not too far away with the groundhog location.
Oh, that's sort of a technical. If you service more than one home, that's considered to be a public water system, and there's actually many categories of what's considered public water system. This is a bit of a side note, but for instance, structures like this have one singular well, but because they service members of the public and there's employees here, this is an instance of a public water supply, even though it's not actually connected to other parcels. The schools well, that's considered a type of public well. The restaurants and things that serve the public,
Good to know.
yeah. So how you define that is somewhat a matter of specific language and use. So that's the instance at the adjacent parcel they serve.
That letter that you mentioned.
Yeah. So largely, those were all things that were evaluated and those are largely.
So it's not a surprise to you.
No. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Does the SECRA process evaluate alternatives, including the do-nothing alternative, or does it just evaluate the proposed project?
It evaluates alternatives. I don't know about the do-nothing alternative. That's a good question. But certainly alternatives is a mainstay in the process. Yeah.
Okay.
And obviously, we can't evaluate alternatives like different sightings or, we just have to wait for the secret review to happen. However, I put an item on the agenda here. I don't think we need to discuss it in depth, having to do with the relative strengths and weaknesses of clustered IA systems versus individual IA systems. We're starting to have that conversation before. I thought that it was appropriate for us to just at least think about a little bit. I don't know if anybody, wants to, I can start things off a little bit. But what my it has been put in the public mind that there's an alternative between the clustered IA system or effluent-based clustered system for all of the municipal buildings versus individual systems under each of the buildings in the municipal complex. So that seems to have been placed as a choice. The third choice has been put out is do nothing. I personally would be very strong about, let's not assume it's all of A or all of B or all of C. There are always intermediate solutions between every other solution. So it may be that there are combinations of things to look at. But I do think it's important to ask ourselves, what can individual IA systems do under the town buildings versus a clustered effluent-based system?
So clustered, do you also implies the nitrate system?
Not necessarily the nitrate system.
Right, I just want to understand.
No, not, I mean, again, we're not trying, there was some objection to trying to approve of any one system, and we can't do that before we have environmental reviews, right? Right.
So a clustered would be this building and.
Well, all the municipal buildings going to a single.
I saw the word clustered and I just scratched my head.
Right. What essentially it means is all of the effluent liquid from all of the 7 municipal buildings being channeled to a single location where it can be examined.
Centralized.
Examined before being discharged in one way or another back into recharging the ground, right?
Is it?
So we have either 7 individual systems.
And just a bigger.
Individual, so, or more, essentially, whether it's the Nitrix unit or whatever units are used, bringing all that wastewater to a single place where it can be examined in a tank, treated as appropriate, perhaps by the Nitrix system, and then discharged. So those are the 2 basic design ideas: individualized systems under every building, or a centralized tank.
What is the data on cluster as opposed to individual in regards to intensity of effluent that's being, or discharge rather?
Well, obviously, if you take 7 systems and you take the effluent from all 7 systems, you have the sum total of those 7 systems, right, to address.
In one area.
Yes, you would have, well, again, if the 7 systems are all in one area, then it's in the same area.
The field would be in that area.
Yeah, I mean, and how you discharge could be distributed, so not necessarily in one area, right? In fact, I would hope we can ultimately get to not discharging in one area, but yes, when you have a single tank, you have to discharge that waste. So again, what I would be looking for would be points of comparison. I don't know if any. First thing, I would just point out is that individual nitrogen systems are cheaper. Individual nitrogen reducing systems are cheaper than a collective system.
A hell of a lot less plumbing.
Well, depending again on where you're siting, right?
Whatever, an individual, it's like building septic tank. It's building septic tank, storage facility, the tank you're talking about.
So the discharges.
Tank treatment and then sending it back.
Yeah, there's clearly a cost comparison that has to be made. It's clearly the cheapest option that's in front of us.
And if this pump breaks, nobody's got a toilet.
Well, in the municipal buildings, right? So other points of comparison besides cost. Other points of comparison besides
The
cost.
amount of nitrate removed.
The amount of nitrate removed. So do we have just a general sense of that? Just to, not, again, trying to be, you were saying what individual advanced systems, innovative advanced systems reduce nitrogen down to. You were saying a bit about that.
Oh, yeah, it's, on a residential setup, and there's somebody here that, I don't know if she's here on government time, but let's say the residential building has, is got a concentration of 65 or 70. And then when you're done with at least 2 of the systems, you got a level of 10. So it's you got a 6-to-1 reduction in nitrate.
Right. And here in the municipal systems, we're talking about concentrations much higher, 120 roughly milligrams of nitrogen.
I don't know that we know. I've seen numbers between now 120. Before that, it was always 150 to 200, and sometimes it was just 200. So I don't know.
So we're expecting to bring it down somewhere above 10 milligrams of nitrogen.
To what?
But we would wind up with a discharge of above 10 milligrams of nitrogen.
I don't know.
Starting from, say,
Given what you're saying, the simpler problem, it's down to 10.
Well,
or do we know?
It depends.
Well, okay, so what the important point that we should just be clear about is that at 10 milligrams, we're at non-potable water, officially by USDC. Right.
19 or 20?
19.
19 is the residential limit. So we talk about 10 for IA systems. Many of the pre-approved or the approved IA systems by Suffolk County don't achieve 10. Some of the best performers.
10 to the 19.
19 is the limit. And some have struggled to meet 19, but that's the purpose of the approval process to understand. So, and the other important thing, though, is that we are required to achieve 10 for these commercial installations, not 19. So the complication is adapting those particular pieces of equipment for this more challenging environment where not only the inputs are substantially higher, but the requirement for output is half of what would be normally tolerated.
So the efficacy of the system has to meet a much higher standard.
Yes.
Correct. Exactly. So let's just take, something that's already residentially approved, like Fuji or Hydro Action. So that data residentially is available through Suffolk County. They've been testing it extensively. And so when we are talking about now using those in commercial applications, they have to be re-engineered to handle different inputs to get different outputs. So not only are they dealing with something that's twice or three times as strong as it comes in, but the expectation or the requirement is that it comes out half as potent as what normally is allowed. And that's one of the challenges that we have examined with the individual systems. These are relatively low flow surge type operations. Like at the Legion, the number is very, very high, but that's because you have 1 or 2 public events a week where you get a huge flow and then you get nothing. Historically, those types of systems don't perform as well because there's an inconsistency with what goes in, with how fast it comes in. Same thing with the school. It's a surge type system where you have lots of periods of downtime, lots of periods of high use time. So just when you're looking at the use of an IA system, there's an advantage to combining them for blending the flows, blending the wastewater characteristics to achieve something that's a little bit more average.
Right, but even so, if I could just point out, Joe, I mean, this is self-evident.
Yeah.
Those flows are happening largely between 9 and 5 at these types of facilities, simply
Definitely.
because that's when they're occupied.
Yeah.
So overnight, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., nothing.
But that, I think, is not the kind of surge that we're talking about. Residential use is the same. Typically, nobody's showering between, midnight and 5 a.m. So with the type of flows that are disruptive are something like the Legion is 0 from Monday through Thursday, and then 2,000 gallons on Friday and Saturday and Sunday, and then 0 for another 10 days. The startup time, we know from testing IA systems in seasonal places, even has significantly reduced efficacy. And Meg could probably speak more towards her experience with that in this.
So does that argue for impounding the material, and then processing it
Like you
intensively?
might be able to do with a clustered system where you can hold on to the waste for a period of time.
It's, I think, more of an argument, not to say it's not achievable with individual systems, but it's a complication that has to be considered. And it's also a regulatory concern. Monitoring and tuning 7 different systems is much different than having fully monitored centralized system where you have more control as opposed to one guy going to 7 different places trying to hit all of those goals, and each of them are going to behave a little bit differently.
Yep.
So it's not to say that you can't do it, but it's something that has to be strongly considered, as well as the cost. Having an operator service one larger piece of equipment versus a whole slew of them, it is significant.
So I do want to keep us on a pace, and we can go further into each of the weeds that we encounter. But so just to put a number on this, though, potentially for a clustered system, your nitrogen reduction is down to 3 milligrams. My understanding is.
So essentially,
Quickly.
Yeah.
When you say clustered, are we talking a specific number, or are we talking?
Yes, the municipal
say, 3
building.
through 10? What are the numbers that you're talking?
3 through 10.
Systems, a clustered system.
I'm not sure how Peter's defining cluster, but I'm conceptually, when I say centralized, I mean the bulk, if not all of these to one location versus all of them being individual. So there are a couple of major players. Obviously, the school, the Legion Hall, and the Town Hall are the biggest creators. They have the highest flow numbers. So if you were going to centralize some of them, those would be the ones that you would focus on. But I think really we're talking about, in theory, what are the differences here versus centralized versus, independent
A lot
individual.
of people don't think of it that way. They think of, just a bigger AI system, period, to do everything, and it's equal. In other words, all AI is equal.
But so that we're trying to.
And look, if we back up a little bit, this is really the choice you're making initially, is centralized versus independent. In a central system, you can choose any type of treatment that you want. If you love Fuji, we could consider Fuji. The reason Nitrex is the one that's slotted is because it happens to be the one that's achieving the lowest numbers in this type of application, and the designer is guaranteeing 5 or below. So, that's not to say that you can't get.
There's a performance guarantee with that system?
Yeah, 5 is the designer's responsibility to achieve. And that doesn't mean that if you were to use Fuji like at the school, the designer is obligated to make that system meet 10 as the requirement. So that's not unique, but we are able to achieve 5, which is twice as good as 10, which is the requirement.
So just to kind of cover the waterfront here, our capacity to test for emerging contaminants and other things, that disease vectors, et cetera, in terms of the centralized system versus the individualized systems, I think that comparison needs to be made, our ability to just know what's in our wastewater. I don't know if you would want to speak to that, Joe.
You can sample any type of system at your house, so someone could come and take a sample out of your septic system. The ease with which you can sample centralized is for obvious reasons. All streams are coming to one place. And so the idea that you would have the simplistic approach to testing aligns with centralized versus independent. You'd have to then go and sample each one. That makes it a little bit more.
Are we not, if we centralize, are we not required to do
on a much more frequent,
higher level of?
Certainly not for exotic diseases. That's the type of thing that you have the option to test if you like, because coincidentally your flow all comes to the same place and you're sampling quite often. But the monitoring requirements for centralized systems are significantly higher than on the independents.
So then again, trying to just keep us kind of quickly going through the bullet points. Emerging contaminants, being able to adapt our treatment strategies for emerging contaminants. Is there a comparison between individual and clustered approaches?
It's largely impractical to retrofit small-scale independent systems to treat
emerging
contaminants. One, on the basis that you have different emerging contaminants perhaps at different buildings because of their use. One building may be higher on PFAS than others. Decentralized, that they're all coming to the same place. You have the opportunity to treat everything in a single swath.
Rick has his hand up.
I have a concern that the emerging pathogen contaminants issue is stressed too strongly in the conversations that the town and maybe the world is having on these. There's no doubt that there are penguins in Antarctica that have PFAS in them, in their eggs, in their shells. It's like DDT. It's everywhere. And I have not seen, although I'm sure maybe somebody knows, the contamination of PFOs in our wastewater may mostly be from the water itself, and that
you mean
the way you treat for. People should be considering the point of use.
Right.
In other words,
for PFAS,
if I get 8 glasses of water, that's the water that I need to get the PFAS away from. But to try and treat through a septic system when there are 3 or 4 probably higher source points for these chemicals, we need to recognize we can't wastewater treat the PFO problem away because it's everywhere.
I think that we all agree with you that PFOS, PFOS should be treated on the source side. I think we all agree.
On the which side?
On the source side, on the intake side, not on that
okay.
particular problem.
All right, well, why are we talking about it then
Well,
for IA systems?
PFAS is only one of the emerging contaminants that we might think about. We have a list of 199 things that, the USGS is able to detect in our wastewater. So, even when we go back to John Cronin's comments, and certainly Joe's comments after John came on, retired, that nitrogen never travels alone, that that nitrogen is the tip of our iceberg. Now, I agree with you that we don't have one treatment strategy, and we're not likely to do an expensive treatment for PFAS, PFOS at the center system itself. I think that that's probably correct. You would treat on the.
That's what we've been talking about with the.
Yeah, but we should be aware of the problems that we have. How much PFAS, PFOS are coming in through our center system? Is there a way to redirect those so that they're not going into the center of our aquifer? Are there treatments that are appropriate? Should those treatments be done on the back end, the front end, whatever end? But we should know, right?
Probably both ends.
And perhaps both.
But you can't treat on the inside, on the intake, because we don't have a water system here. But one thing I wanted to contribute to this conversation is that it's not just the PFOAs, but it's the PCPs, pharmaceutical care products, that are now getting a lot of traction as far as contamination, because pharmaceuticals are making way into the water table. We see them in Western water. And some of the ones that don't break down but are eternal and never are most difficult to break down come from antibiotics. Now, if you have a school full of 250 kids, at any given time you have, I'm sure, a certain percentage of those children on antibiotics. And so that's where a lot of the concern is looking at now, is those antibiotics that are not metabolized, they just pass right through. So it's not just PFOAs, it's other.
Yeah, if nitrogen is the tip.
They're in shampoo, by the way.
Right.
They're not just in the water you drink, they're in shampoos, they're in, you do a load of laundry, they're in the products that you're washing in there, in the laundry, and what's going out.
Materials in the fabric.
Materials, clothing, I mean, you name it, they're everywhere. But I did want to mention that.
It goes beyond PFAS, PFOS.
It does.
It does. Absolutely. So, right.
Medications are one area.
All right, so emerging contaminants, knowing what we have, and then also being just able to think about what's our next move. Not, because at least we have the water that we can look at and say whether we should release it or not, or do something more with it or not.
Let me just add that with regard to the emerging contaminants, it's not that we are looking at this system with a specific contaminant in mind that needs to be removed. It's in concept, is this the kind of thing that we want the ability to address as we learn more about the issues that face our island? We know that the entryway for the majority of these contaminants is through septic. That's just how this works, be it pharmaceuticals, PFAS. For our use profile, that's how they're getting into our water. And in the absence of a public water system where you can more broadly remove these contaminants from the supply, the approach, in my opinion, and I would expect the Water Advisory Committee to feel, is that you then have the obligation to take it out on the back end. Right now, that's our only opportunity to remove these. And so if we don't take them out, they are just going back in to either resupply the domestic use, or they're entering our environment through a process which is well established. We know everything we put in the ground goes into the estuaries.
Yeah.
So one way or the other, they have to be removed. Either we're going to take the approach of a public water supply where we remove them at the point, which is still the prudent way to do it. In our case, we don't have the opportunity to do that. What's the most responsible way at this stage? It's to at least have the opportunity to remove those as we know about them.
I would also comment, Joe, that without real precise measurement, it could be the case, and I'm wondering if by not treating it, you're in fact concentrating it.
Well, certainly that's the case here. We know that the groundwater hydrogeology lingers in such a way that what we put in the ground here will accumulate. We are putting in more just from looking at our nitrogen situation. We have bioaccumulated the nitrogen in this particular area because the water lingers. The same we should expect to be the case for any other contaminant that goes into the ground where groundwater lingers for decades, if not centuries.
Okay. So there was one other little point, and I want to take 10 seconds and say, if we intend to reuse our water, we're going to have to centralize it, pull it up, take a look at it. So if we're going to go there, I don't know that we'll get there ever, but I'm certainly hopeful. So that's just one other point of comparison. If we can then move on a little bit, I think, Andrew, there are at least three old new business items that I kind of didn't want to lose track of. Actually, if I could do this in order. The minutes reminded me that we were saying that we would establish a committee for having a fertilizer district.
Didn't say that.
And so I don't know that, it reminded me that of all the things I hadn't done in my life in the course of the last month. I wonder if, I don't know if you wanted to speak about this?
I have not.
Yeah, we have.
I have not, the COVID and.
Absolutely.
I give you 1,000 excuses. I have not really.
No excuse required.
I would like to, very much. And I think it's now, so.
Okay.
Right now, pulling together the information that we got from Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, and looking at that and putting it in some kind of concise bullet point, and then just going down what we can achieve and the timeline, and then presenting it to the town, saying again here.
So we are really open, and I'm open if you need committee volunteers, or if this is, I think, a really important topic. So we, again, new business, we're going to bring it in our follow-up sessions.
Yes, I will.
And Lisa will do at least some on it, and I'm happy to do some lifting too. Greg wanted to make sure that we were doing data collection around nitrogen in the center. There seem to be a number of sources, we have municipal buildings and so forth. And in talking to Joe about that, it seemed like there was just sort of a process question, how to do that best. And I was actually a little surprised by what Joe's thoughts were about process around data in the center. Go ahead.
I find that we don't have a real strong data-based knowledge of what the nitrate levels really are in the aquifer. We know that they're high. We know that a lot of people get their wells tested, but we can't get that information. And presumably we have results for our 7 buildings, I imagine.
Some of them, yeah.
So, I wondered about, hey, what we could do as a WAC, as a Water Advisory Committee, we could arrange for the purchase of a Hanna Instruments nitrate photometer. The whole setup, it probably costs about $600, $700. I'm not really sure. The unit itself basically is like $400, and then there's a couple of ancillary things that you get. And it would allow us to run something like 100, or depending on how much we spend, 300. We would be able to go into a kitchen, or we could go into a bathroom, get water, run the test, and come up with a reasonably accurate number. It was plus or minus a half I think the level was, it's the nitrate accuracy is plus or minus 0.5 milligrams per liter, plus or minus 10% of the reading at 25 degrees centigrade. So I'm not 100% certain why there is, I guess that temperature changes.
All right, well, let's keep this on the level of new business that we're going to then take on. Okay. So that seems really interesting. I'm always in favor of citizen science, doing that kind of thing.
So we have that opportunity, and my thought is that, after these meetings on a monthly basis for a year, we could grab probably not all the buildings. Maybe we just take this building and maybe the American Legion and maybe the police station, grab the water, run the test, and we would start to understand seasonally, is there any change in the nitrate labor, and what numbers are we actually getting? And it seems to me it could be valuable information before the installation of whatever the system turns out to be, and afterwards as well. We'd be able to have a well-documented scientific basis.
Better than test strips, for instance, or even titration methodology, because it's a device that basically.
I'm all in favor of getting good at this.
And you get a good data, you get good data output, which is consistent. And what we need is recording methodology then to track. In other words, is that when we do this, organize the data in such a way that maybe it can be continued in a broader way. I always like to use the GIS systems that we have to be able to integrate this into each of the lots and be able to basically have it for a longer period, and we can then extend it to residences.
So I thought that your interest also was in, data that exists as well, that already exists in the center.
And Joe, I guess, I know that you have had, let's see, how does this, work? You got challenges to your ability to put some numbers together. And I could go, if you've got a file that says this is our readings, that can be shared with this committee.
Yeah.
I'd come over.
Two primary comments. The idea that we would do some of our own or have the ability to do rapid testing is phenomenal. That particular device that you mentioned, we have used at the Presbyterian Church, and we've had some unfortunate errors with accuracy. We haven't been able to actually hone in on a correlation between what that device spits out versus our laboratory testing. It may be some user error, but from our experience with that, it's not been a reliable source in comparison to laboratory testing. That's not to say that it can't be, but at first glance, I think, okay, we have to be careful with doing this on our own, or perhaps there's some error analysis that we can do.
Well, that's new information, and I'd be interested to see that. That would be helpful. That would, keep me from running down the track on a dead end.
Yeah, but that said, though, the idea is fabulous. I mean, if we could have real, more frequent and low-cost testing, we'd have the opportunity to do this on a scale where the data could be useful. The second point, I think that's most important, is that, we're looking at the trends in the municipal buildings, but the challenge continues to be that the high nitrogen doesn't exist within our testing periphery. Historically, the nitrogen levels at these municipal buildings have not been always low, but have not been outrageously problematic. And certainly there's a disparity between what we see in the municipal buildings versus what we've seen in the USGS testing, certainly the famous red heat map. But what we are noticing is that just immediately beyond the municipal properties is a dramatic increase in nitrogen levels, and they tend to exist in the private world.
These are in private wells?
Private wells.
Yes, private
and so Meg and I have been working more recently, just in the past week or two, on getting some releases from private wells, having some homeowners share them with us, but there's a huge legal liability issue with going to everybody in the neighborhood and saying, hey, you want to share your nitrogen levels with us. On the bit of data that we do have, it's dramatic. Places like School Street, Smith Street, very, very high nitrogen. Directly adjacent to us at the Presbyterian Church, very high nitrogen, infamously famous high nitrogen. Just down 114 a bit towards the IGA by Hubbard's Maria, very high nitrogen. When we compare those to the municipal buildings that we have,
Nothing.
Mismatch. We'd say, okay, we historically have had some higher levels here at the town hall, but not even over the legal limits in most cases.
So anecdotally, because that's the kind of world we're in from a data standpoint.
And resources, yeah.
And resources. Yeah. Okay. Anecdotally, there's an issue that needs to be, one, obviously understood, and is of a significant concern.
It is, yeah. And so there's a couple of challenges there. One, that's sort of a half-baked theory. Is this actually true? Are these isolated cases where it's unique to their property? Are those properties self-influenced? Do they have failed septics that are too close to their well, et cetera, et cetera?
Or is it the neighbor?
Or is it the neighbor? Right. So there's infinite work that can be done to hone in on this. However, based on the resources that we have, my initial conclusion is that this data that we're seeing aligns very much so with the theory behind treating wastewater here in the municipal scale, that we are having an impact, and that impact travels in more or less every direction from here. This is the epicenter. The impacts that we put on groundwater here are traveling to our neighbors, and they're traveling in a lot of different places. Perhaps it's premature for me to make that claim, because as Meg said, there are a lot of variables here. But if you had to draw some conclusions from what we're seeing, that would be my take. And I didn't invent that. These are phenomenons that we've been discussing for probably decades around here. People have always.
But Greg has been pushing on the data, having some data that we can hang our hats on. And I'm just, again, it's new business. We don't have to discuss it in full now. It's 3 o'clock, but yeah, we want to keep going on precisely this topic of knowing our data around the center nitrogen and doing it in a careful way so we're not exposing private homeowners or legal liabilities in ways that don't make sense. So we're good for continuing on that. Last to new old, Andrew had come to me with 2 topics over the course of these, or us, with 2 topics over the course of the last couple of meetings. One is there any way, and I don't know that we can discuss this in full now, but is there any way to get cleaner water to homeowners in the center area who are pulling up in excess of 20 milligrams of nitrogen closer to raw sewage? Is there any obligation of the town to help those folks out? That's number one. And number 2 was, how can we clean things up in the center? If we're going to clean from the center outward in a donut and then site some water supplies near center or off center somewhere, how can we get more cleaning happening? How can we accelerate the process of cleaning beyond even perhaps individual or clustered IA systems? And I think that that's a topic that's worth our while to be thinking about. I have some thoughts, but again.
So this gets to, what problem are we trying to solve and why? We're obviously aware that the municipal buildings are contributing to the nitrogen problem in the center. Okay, why is that a problem? It's a problem because a lot of people around here are using the aquifer for their own drinking water, and there are public health implications of having too high nitrogen in your drinking water. So let's stop contributing to that problem by treating the wastewater, right? So I'm saying to myself, okay, fine. If I'm living around here, I'd like a faster solution to that. And does it make sense to actually engage the neighborhood in a discussion around a potable water system? And does it make sense to actually engage with Suffolk County Water Authority around essentially piping the center up? And if we went down that road, actually both these roads, we would address the root cause issue, or part of the root cause issue, which is the nitrogen being contributed by the municipal buildings via the center system that we were talking about earlier. That is part of the root cause. And we would also accelerate the improvement in drinking water quality for the broader neighborhood if we sponsored a public water system. So I'm thinking of what Lisa drove through with West Neck Bay in terms of all the interactions with Suffolk County that I was also a part of, but Lisa drove it. Is there a reason to kind of engage the neighborhood in the question to see what kind of interest there is?
Definitely.
Okay, how would we go about doing that?
That's right.
That's a political decision.
No, it starts, I think, with understanding the problem, which goes to this data question we were just talking about. And then then it goes to, okay, what do people want to do about it? And then it ultimately becomes a political question, but I don't think it starts as a political.
Well, I just wanted to say that what you were describing, Joe, about these much higher level concentrations, say, in School Street, et cetera, for whatever reason, that really wasn't apparent to me. And many times I listen to conversations about this wastewater treatment facility, et cetera, and it really ignores that, and it really focuses on these municipal buildings as if they are the sole source of this concentration. Even though the legacy of these buildings is really not that old compared to many of the other homes around here when you think about it. So I don't think that, generally speaking, the public really appreciates just how widespread this is, to your point, Andrew, which is, gee, it's a way bigger problem, and it really involves a lot of citizens, not just institutions.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it really matters what the cause is. What matters is the drinking water quality.
Cleaning it up. Yeah, Lisa, you had your hand up before.
It's money. We know that, right? It's money.
Yep.
Because we're paying 1.7.
Yep.
For infrastructure.
Yep.
And so putting in new infrastructure is going to be more. So it's a money thing. But also, with regards to, just lost my whole train of thought. It'll come back. Keep going.
Well, some people don't like public water. I mean,
Well, yeah, there's that.
that's another aspect, that there are certain people in the neighborhood that said, I don't want any part of this. Now, you need 40% or some number like that for Suffolk County Water, people to sign up for a pipe to go into an area. But your idea of an educational aspect to explain alternatives and understand more about what's going on would be the beginning of coming to some kind of a solution that would appeal to them possibly.
I just
Go ahead,
my
Lisa,
thought, and
please.
that was, what about some type of rebate to give to homeowners to mitigate their own individual water supplies problem, until such time as you can get all of the energy for putting in a public water system.
Under the sink type RO system, reverse osmosis would help.
That's a possibility.
Okay, the nitrates.
Well, I disagree, Ken, because that system basically takes bad things out of the water and then re-injects them back into the ground.
Yes, it does.
So you're concentrating the very bad things you want to get rid of.
Yes, but you are
Cleaning it. You're not removing it.
We're not going to get to the end of this conversation now, but I think it does speak to our role as the WAC, and I think that our role is we do need to be a semi-permeable membrane. We go both ways. We talk to the public, we talk to the town, right? So I don't think that it's beyond our purview to knock on doors around here and say, oh, would you be interested in public water? Would you fill out a survey, or would you, whatever, but to do outreach to our communities. I know in my role as part of the WAC, I have definitely gone to community groups and neighborhood groups and spoken to people and said, tried to connect them to us. So
we'll bring the test kit with us when we have our fairs.
Absolutely. So I think that that's why I wanted to get this on the new business agenda, because we could need to come back to what is our obligation to the people right around here who are seeing these peaks.
And I just want to add a little bit more to Andrew's point, because I wholeheartedly agree with his assessment here. I want to reiterate, though, that I'm not asserting that the municipal activities here are the sole contributor to that problem.
Right, sure. They may be as well.
The impetus behind wastewater treatment here is that we are a big contributor, and we have the opportunity to do something that grabs a big swath of those contributing to the nitrogen problem. Looking at some of those private tests, they could very well be self-influenced, or it just happens to be legacy nitrogen from 300 years of people living there. But here we know we have an opportunity to take 6,000-7,000 gallons a day and treat it to a very high level. That would go a very long way in mitigating this problem. And Doug, to your point, our treatment system at the Presbyterian Church contains the rejected backwash.
Right, so it's
For that
not
very
really,
reason.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
part of
yeah.
the expense is basically taking it off the island.
Yeah, so what gets spit back from the filtration was of concern to put back in the ground, and so that's contained, and
That's an expensive system. I mean, that kind of an operation would be.
Yes, but we have many of options for possible solutions, and it's all not one size fits all. It's all about right sizing our answers and knowing before we go. So.
If you kind of look at this in the round, if our primary objective is a public health objective, which goes to the quality of the water people are drinking in their homes, whether or not they come from public, private wells or whatever. If our objective as a community is to make sure that people have water that is good for them over their lifetimes, as science defines them,
is safe for them.
it's safe,
Yeah.
correct, correct. Then we're contributing to a potential cause of concern by pushing the center wastewater system. And on the other side of it, we could contribute to improvement in their drinking water quality by on the source side of it.
Certainly.
And so working those two angles in the areas of the town that seem to have a problem strikes me as a really legitimate thing for us to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
A first step with that, I think, would be to understand the nature of the problem more, which gets into this data collection question. Because we don't want to start going around and spending money to solve problems that don't exist, or solve problems in places where they don't exist and ignore other places or whatever. So it would seem that that's a first step. And another kind of preliminary step would be to potentially engage with Suffolk County about putting in a potable water system in the towns, in the center, which could mean 3 or 4 supply wells feeding to a central treatment facility and then a distribution network. Because I'm concerned about if you have 3 or 4 supply wells and you're pumping them hard, you're bringing the contamination to the wells. So you want to be able to kind of deal with that. But it seems to me those are kind of 2 initial steps.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So I'll just put that out there as an initiative.
Okay.
So there was one other item that I skipped over kind of accidentally. I don't want to, this old and new business, we clearly have to return to these topics. But one other item that is kind of on my current radar is that South Ferry is coming online with data. And I don't know how how we can access that data, but I think that that's something we should be thinking about, what the data feeds are for I don't know if that's probably
Just title
contacting.
information.
I think they're publicly available.
Yeah.
I'm sure the feeds are out there, right?
And you can export to various data files for the particular categories that you're looking for. Nitrogen is one of them, I believe.
Right.
It's
So
on GIS, it's being run by GIS,
USGS.
USGS,
Yeah.
thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, so it should have its own.
SGS, and I'm sure they have a portal, and I would at minimum, we're looking for a URL and start looking
Yeah.
at that feed of data coming in.
Might be in the dashboard.
It's probably there.
Might be in the USGS
Probably in
dashboard,
the
maybe,
dashboard.
I don't know.
Okay, well, again, I'm happy to tool around, but I welcome everybody to kind of be looking for integrating that as we're getting a little bit more serious about having real data, so, and synthesizing data, so. Okay. Other items that I haven't put on the agenda that, we seem to be doing extremely well. Lisa?
Yeah, a little while ago, we had talked about a campaign to inform the public about not disposing their drugs into the illness toilet seat. So the drugstore has now got a blue box, which will receive both controlled substances and prescription drugs, so people can take everything there. My son is a graphic designer, so I gave him the task of coming together with a simple but effective poster that we can kind of get around the island, just, again, making people aware that this could be a problem. Don't flush your drugs, don't put them down the sink, don't put them in the trash. regardless of what the FDA says. So I'm just saying that I gave them this to come up with a sample for us to look at. Are we interested in this type of campaign? Yes.
Yes.
Is there any information? The sample I saw was very simple. It was a picture of a toilet, a picture of a sink, and a garbage. It said, do not. And then on the bottom would be where we would put the information about why, people end up drinking their neighbor's drugs because it migrates into the water table. So I'm just sort of moving ahead with this.
Yes.
I'm hoping that the WAC maybe has funding for running off posters, and we'll put them around, but, I pushed the drugstore.
So we've tended not to spend our budget that we have. We have minimal budget, but budget for arts and crafts kinds of supplies. And so I think, unless I may miss my guess, this is one that we all would agree with on consensus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once there's a poster, we can post it
Yes.
on social media.
On social media, too.
Once there's a graphic, then it can.
Okay, well, he was supposed to have it by today, but he's working on the deadline, so hopefully in the next couple of weeks I'll have that. So just throwing it out there.
Great. All right, well, more new business. Yes, Andrew.
I just want to say that I'll make a motion that to commend the Shelter Island Reporter's editorial judgment in select
Here.
Yeah. You brace us.
And I will just say that I worked with you very closely in that whole West Neck water, Suffolk County water negotiation. And I said to you, hey, our company's looking for people who know infrastructure the way you obviously do.
Yeah,
So
but no thank you.
I know that is what you said. So, but I just want to say I was just really happy to see that.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. It's been a tremendous honor. I was at first horrified by the whole thing, but now I realize that it's an honor. And
It's a wonderful
hope I can do
And
it.
well deserved.
Well deserved, exactly,
Well, thank you so much.
for multiple reasons.
Well, really, so many of you have volunteered for years, and other committee members that have volunteered for years, so we just need more people.
That in the spring.
All right, well, we seem to be relaxed and reaching kumbaya even earlier than the hour and a half time limits. Are there other things we could?
I have something on, it's old business, I think.
Okay.
And it's not for conversation now, but I put together my thoughts with a couple of sites,
Yes,
a couple of sites off, that talk about geothermal wells. Again, the idea is get this to everybody. You'll see it in your inbox. You'll say, what the hell is this? Okay. And then you can think about it. At our next meeting, we can put it on the agenda and talk it through. I'm sure that few of you will be surprised that I'm relatively negative about the idea of vertical wells. It's just talking vertical. It's not talking horizontal, because I see them as they're two different technologies, obviously. And they have two different issues that can come back.
And as we're educating ourselves, I would advise everybody to think about geothermal along with heat pump technology in general. Air-based heat pump technology in general. Because again, sometimes there are problems that you could solve, but maybe you don't have to solve. So
Heat pump alone is a great start.
right. So let's continue. And again, I think that there is something further to be thought about with geothermal, that we don't have to spin our wheels on every.
Very expensive.
Right.
Apparently, there's a real push, and I wish I could remember where I saw this. I don't think it was in the paper, because it feels like it was actually a video. It might have been on one of the news channels, and they were talking about air heat pump systems.
Right.
New York City,
Right.
apparently they are proliferating madly. That people
It's starting to require them.
that people are putting the air-based heat pumps in rather than the ground source, because obviously it's hard to dig. You drill down, then you run into a subway, then you're in trouble. But
Greg, I would really benefit from just sitting down and understanding this technology, I have to claim ignorance in it.
I was gonna say the same thing, Lisa. We need like a heat pumps for dummies
Yeah.
course before we can really discuss it, I think, in like a productive way.
Could be supplemental with your existing system, very easy.
Right.
This is basically talking about the impacts of digging into an aquifer with a vertical borehole.
Right.
And
we do have it.
things that can happen.
But we do have, again, everybody seems to have expressed a certain amount of interest in the non-geo heat pump technology. It's very similar technology. It's very similar principles. Among the things that are similar, among the things it is similar to is air conditioning. It involves a compressor. Some of the issues have to do with similar noise issues that you might have with an air conditioner, because of the need to use a compressor in the process. I think that understanding the basic science, which is kind of miraculous, because it can make heat and it can make cold. And,
Right.
it's kind of cool. But again, getting some basic comfort with what the science around it is worth educating ourselves on it is worth our while. And
We have one. It
have a
is
heat pump?
amazingly effective and cheap,
Air to air?
air to air.
Yeah, me as well, yeah.
Do you
I
have
couldn't believe
solar
it.
as well?
No. No, but I'm buying power from LIPA
I don't know.
at the
Going rate.
which is lower than the retail rate.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. After you go, it's only available to you in the wintertime. If you heat with electric, you get that.
Does it have to be all electric to heat? Or
Yeah.
could you have supplemental oil or fossil?
No, you can have a wood stove, but you can't have a fossil supplement.
Okay.
And just to put numbers on it, my heating bills for a 2,000 square foot, not terribly well insulated house, but reasonable, are never over 190
Holy.
a month.
That's pretty good.
So I have 3 months a year when they're around 180, 190. I never use the air conditioning because the house is,
You don't worry about that. Yeah.
and it's amazingly cheap. And there's no fuel stored on site, so you don't have leaky oil tanks.
You have wall units that you put in?
No, I put in
Central?
basically 2 HVAC units outside the kitchen window, and then
Comes into an existing duct system?
air handler in the house. This was part of renovating the house.
Yeah, you can, it's an interesting swap
Amazing.
for anybody who has
Very
ducts.
good.
Heat exchanger or no? Air exchanger.
It's
Hot air going out, and exhaust, it heats the cold air coming in?
there, it's an HVAC, it's 2 HVAC units outside the house and then 2 heat exchangers inside the house.
Observers won't have any comment.
And to the degree that this is substituting for geothermal and substituting for storage tanks for gas and oil in the ground, it's WAC business, even though it's not a water thing. So,
Yeah.
I'm thrilled with it. Any comments from the?
I do have one more. Did you guys do the minutes last month's minutes yet?
Yes.
On the screen, I don't know if they want to.
Is there one?
yeah, actually, thank you very much. So Doug reminds me, and I should have done this on my own, if anybody who's in attendance wanted to comment on anything, we have a few more minutes. I don't want to. So anyway, again, speak up if you do.
For those of us that are interested in some of these estuary things, on the next WQI meeting, it might be Pam Demarest, I'm not sure. There's somebody is going to come into the WQI meeting and talk. So if anybody's interested in that
The scallop shell, the scallop seeding.
that conversation about the impact of either of what the condition of, I guess it was Dickerson, but I'm not sure.
So
I wasn't going to be here, so that's.
So the Menantic Creek folks as well are interested in coming to us on a related topic, scallop and seeding and gardening, perhaps next month. And the WQI has a proposal for funding on the table around that same thing. So we should be kind of tuning into what each the left hand and the right hand are doing.
That was sent around on the.
Yes. Greg forwarded that video,
the
correct.
Quad area, or Southampton, I guess it is.
Right. So, yeah, no, I certainly, Greg pointed out in the minutes in the program that had the most relevant stuff for us, so please do take a look at that. All right.
Good job.
Here, Lisa
Yes.
has a correction. Can you read your correction, Lisa?
The correction was with regards to West Neck water discussion. I don't have it in front of me. I think that was the headline, and it was the first paragraph. It isn't 7.1, it's 1.7 million. Over
Oh, geez.
25 years, thank you very much.
Wow.
It was
Good catch.
I'm happy still.
I didn't know that.
one correction. Okay, thank you, Lisa. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, 3:28 I see. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So noted.
All right, all in favor? All right, everybody, have a great week.